Roll call of board members.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll do the roll call tonight. Director Moore,
Here.
Director Bennett,
Here.
Director Garcia is not here. Vice President Jenkins,
Present.
President Young.
Present. All right. We'll dispense with the pledge for tonight since it's just a workshop. We'll go into public. Well, do we need to adopt the agenda, Council? I mean, it's
On the agenda, then we should.
it actually isn't.
Well, then we don't need to.
Okay. All right.
We've already posted the notice of special.
Okay. So we'll go into public participation. Have we received any public participation?
We've not received any requests in person or via email. Anybody on the Zoom call here for public comment?
All right. If you would like to address the body, or unmute yourself at this time. All right, seeing no one, we'll go ahead and close public participation, and we will dive into the workshop. So who's leading off?
I'll start out with a little intro. Just wanted to thank all of you for your time tonight. We have two main items to consider as part of our water rate study workshop. And those are, first of all, conduct a rate study workshop, provide direction on the scenarios and the tier structure. And John Wright is here from Raftellus to lead that discussion. And then, as related to the water study and potential future rate adjustments, part two is review and comment on the outreach plan. And Socorro will be leading that discussion, and JPW is also online to participate. So with that, this is a workshop setting, so I'd say generally, being more interactive during the course of the presentations is fine and really expected and needed. I would say slide by slide, no need to wait until the end of the presentation to engage. So that sounds good. I'll turn it over to John and Raftellus. Mr. Wright.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Thank you for having my firm here tonight to present to you. Next slide, please, Jose. So we're going to very quickly go over the objectives of the project, the process we've used in developing your financial plans and rate studies. Then a real key issue for us is the financial planning scenarios, which we want to present to you, as well as proposed FY26 rates. And there is a proposed change in rate structure associated with those rates. I think what's critical for us tonight is to try to get as much board direction as we can on your preferred financial planning scenario, as well as the rate structure change that we'd like to talk to you about. And the reason it's so critical tonight is it's very important to get that guidance in order to inform our public engagement process. Next slide, please, Jose. So let's start off process and go right ahead, Jose. So here are a lot of the key drivers that go into the development of a financial plan for any utility, and not just West Valley. Projected operations and maintenance. Another critical and maybe perhaps the most important driver, capital improvement program, and what you are projected to spend on infrastructure projects. Water conservation is important in two ways, reflecting it to the extent that it's appropriate to do so in the demand forecast, which drives water sales revenue, and then also whether or not our rate structure sends a cost-based conservation price signal. Of course, customer account growth and how many customers you're going to be adding into the system is a key driver. Also, making sure that we maintain adequate cash reserves for the utility, both cash reserves from an operational perspective that will allow us, for example, to deal with a potential drought curtailment or a cool, wet summer to the extent we actually still have those in Southern California, as well as cash reserves to deal with contingencies such as unexpected maintenance issues. Obviously, projected inflation is a key part of projecting forward our O&M costs because we reflect our future O&M costs after inflation adjustments. And also, we build inflation into our projected capital improvement costs and what we're going to be paying for infrastructure projects next year or 5 or 10 years down the road. And then finally, it's important to make sure that we maintain a debt service coverage ratio, which is basically a reflection of how much revenue we have available to pay for our debt service. And we not only want to meet obligated debt service coverage ratio, but a financial management target regarding debt service as well. Next slide, please, Jose. So here's a pretty long list of assumptions. Our financial projections use as a starting point your FY26 budget. And staff really worked very hard to really refine your capital improvement program and your projected capital expenditures. And so we're assuming 100% of the capital expenditures that are reflected in the financial planning scenarios. We have a level of customer account growth equal to 1.5% annually, which we have noted here as a little bit of a conservative approach. John, I'm not sure historically what it's. 1.5% is a little bit slightly less than historic norms.
Yeah, John, I'll make a few comments on that. In previous workshops, we actually were using a 2% growth rate. If you look at the past 5 years, it's been more than a 2% growth rate, but we look forward. We talked to engineering. We looked at what projects we have coming up. It looks like it's going to slow a little bit, at least in the near term here. In the near term, so for the next 5 years, we've lowered it from 2% to 1.5%. Again, taking a conservative approach for this water rate study.
I believe that I've been here for 2 previous workshops where we've talked about financial planning. And I think in our very first workshop, we had a optimistic assessment of revenue that would be flowing to the district to offset some of your CIP expenditures. In our current financial planning scenarios, we are taking a conservative approach. And we're assuming that the district's not going to be receiving any grants. In terms of our operating cash reserves, we are seeking to maintain a target equivalent to 6 months of annual O&M expenses. And in our capital improvement cash reserves, we're seeking to meet a target of 25% of the subsequent year's CIP expenditures. And then below that, you can see the inflation assumptions that are built into the model, which we really developed working with staff. I think that a critical one for the district is the 4.4% assumption on water supply, because you have a very diverse water supply portfolio. And so it's one of the key drivers along with CIP of your cost structure. Next slide, please, Jose. Okay, so now we're going to get into scenarios. And the first one we're going to look at on the next slide is what we, I believe, call the baseline CIP scenario. And this is not one of our 3 scenarios. This is just kind of a starter to warming us up before we get to these 3 scenarios. And what the baseline CIP scenario does is it assumes no rate revenue adjustments. And the total 10-year CIP is basically $100 in aggregate. And that CIP includes some necessary upgrades to your existing operations and administration buildings to the tune of $7 million. And lastly, in addition to not having any rate revenue adjustments, they assume no debt proceeds. And so the bottom line associated with this is with sort of the, I'll call it the minimal / baseline level of CIP. If we don't raise rates and we don't use any debt financing, we are in a situation, as shown on the right-hand side with these 2 graphs, where our cash reserves fall not only below the target, but below zero starting in FY 2031. And then we're in a situation where our ability to meet debt service coverage becomes impaired very, very quickly, starting in literally FY 27. And by the time we get to FY 29, not only we cannot meet our debt service coverage target, but we have negative debt service coverage. And so the reason we are showing this to you is to lay the foundation for these three full financial planning scenarios, which do feature rate increases. And so we hope that showing you this helps you understand the need to raise rates. Next scenario, or next slide, please, Jose. So here are our three full scenarios. Scenario one, which we're going to look at next, is the $7 million spending on your ops and admin buildings. And it's all rate increases, no use of debt. Scenario number two is a $20 million expenditure on the. And John, when we get to it, I may have you talk about that a little bit more, what that $20 million does. And associated with scenario two, either all rate financed. And finally, scenario three is where the district builds a new headquarters building. That right now is estimated at $70 million. And we do use debt in that scenario three. There's a $50 million bond issuance. Next slide, please, Jose. Okay, so here's true scenario number one. This is a situation where we have the $180 million of CIP. We spend $7 million on the operation administration building. We don't have any proposed debts, but we do use rate revenue increases to pay for everything. Jose, please go to the next slide if you would. And so here's a look at scenario number one. 5.5% rate increases. New increases. That's not necessarily customer bill increases, but total system rate revenue increases through 2030. And then in the second half of the 10-year planning horizon, 4% increases. And as you can see on the graphs to the right, we do meet our cash reserve targets under this scenario. And we do meet our debt service coverage targets. And Elise, I can't remember whether I introduced you to the board or not, but Elise Ritchie is a colleague of mine at Reftelis. She's been working closely with staff. Elise, do you have any comments here on scenario number one we're looking at that I should note or that we should note?
No, I think the only thing to add really is that the bolded first 5 lines from 26 through 2030, sorry, are the proposed rate revenue adjustments. From 31 to 35, that's outside of this Prop 218 process. Those are more future financial planning rate increases. They're not set in stone or anything.
And what this scenario gets us, once again, is $7 million in expenditures for ops building and admin building upgrades, in addition to CIP for all of the other functions on your system, all of the critical functions that you need to maintain. Jose, let's go to scenario two. Now here our CIP is not 180, but it's increased to 193. And we have a $20 million expenditure for a new operations building. And John, I don't know if you want to comment, but in scenario one, we had a $7 million for upgrades to the ops building and the admin building. Here we're factoring in 20 million for a brand new ops building. I don't know if there are any comments associated with that would be informative to the board.
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit. And going back to the last scenario, that $7 million, I think we have $1 or $2 million budgeted over a 5-year period. I think most of that 5-year period is in the next 5 years, but not all of it. for this scenario 2, we're doing some minor improvements to this existing building, but I think we all recognize Building C and other facilities here need to be replaced. So the bulk of this 20 million, I think 15 plus, is to build a new operations center, and I think also a warehouse out back. And Rocky, maybe you can add a little more detail to that.
Yeah, so the current facilities plan, which we hope to bring to you guys in more detail at a later date, this plan would include demolishing Building C, rebuilding it up, including office space for operations staff, a new improved locker room, and then kind of logistics, metal shops, meter shops, and things like that would help support operations, along with a new warehouse. So inherently, that would free up our warehouse and some ops space within this building for expansion, but it's kind of like the minimal option. Not much changes to this main building here.
It'll get us down the road. It'll take care of the operations facilities, which is our highest priority. And then, maybe 20 some years down the road, we'll be looking at this admin building again about what to do. So,
John,
yes.
did you just say in 27 years from now?
About, it'll get us down the road 20, 30 years.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
But it'll, a brand new ops building will be 50 plus years. But with minor improvements to this building, I guess you would think probably in 20, 25 years, we'll be at a point where we need to talk about replacement or major renovations of the admin portion of the facility.
Our existing buildings here go back to the late 50s, so we're already
Useful
pushing
life.
70. But you're saying the 20 million, 15 of which would be for new Building C, 5 million to do some upgrades to the existing building,
Yeah,
roughly, right?
roughly. And then the other thing that came to light during the facilities master plan when we did structural assessments of this building, there are some very large expenditures. It's not just Band-Aid fixes on this building in the next 10, 15 years to get us another 20 years out of this building. It's replacing roof and roof diaphragms, and it's major HVAC repairs. There's a lot of end of useful life equipment associated with this building that we would be trickling into our ops budget and doing Band-Aid fixes for the remaining useful life of this building.
Leslie, will you show us the next slide? So here's a summary of scenario 2. Now in scenario 1, where we had, $15 million less total CIP, we were projecting 5.5% annual rate revenue adjustments or increases and no debt. Here, with slightly more CIP, we've increased our proposed or our projected rate revenue increases to 6.5% annually, also with new debt. And as we see on the graphs on the right-hand side of the slide, we meet our targets for projected cash reserves as well as debt service coverage under this scenario. Next slide, please. Okay, scenario 3. Well, in scenario 3, our total CIP over the 10-year planning horizon has increased to $243 million. And the reason for that is it includes a new headquarters building and a new ops building. And the estimated cost of that is $70 million. Now, one of the things we can see on the graph to the right is we can see that unlike the two previous scenarios where our proposed capital improvement expenditures each year were somewhat levelized, here we see the big bulge in 29 and 30 as we get to those major expenditures for the HQ building. And this is the one out of the three scenarios where we're proposing to use debt financing and where we need to use debt financing. And we're proposing to obtain debt equivalent to $50 million. So, Jose, if you'd be willing, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so here we are. We're now up to 7.5% annual rate revenue increases. And we have that $50 million of debt proceeds proposed to be received in 2029. And so in scenario one, we had 5.5% annual rate revenue adjustments. In scenario two, we had 6.5% annual rate revenue adjustments. Here in scenario three, we're projecting the need for 7.5% adjustments. So it's going up by 1% annually. And the reason it's only going up by 1% in scenario three is because of our use of debt, which is helping us to extend the repayment of those capital improvement expenditures. Elise, do you remember what our debt financing assumptions were for this $50 million?
I believe it was a 30-year term, and let me check that percentage, and it's a 4% interest rate.
So what are those assumptions? When we look at our graphs on the right-hand side, we see we have a cash reserve bulge in 2029 when we get the debt proceeds. But as we start projecting out in the second half of planning horizon, we're just meeting our cash reserve targets, which is the black line there in the top graph. And you could also see that under this scenario, when we do these debt issues, we fall below our target debt service coverage in 29 when that debt first comes online, and we just meet our target in 2030. And then as our rate revenues begin to build up in the second half of the planning horizon, we more comfortably meet our target. And you'll have to excuse me for one moment. The janitorial staff just walked in with a vacuum sweeper, so I'm going to be closing my door.
Any questions on this one so far?
John, is there anything that you feel is appropriate to discuss or note with the board regarding the new headquarters building, the need for it, and how you develop the cost estimates, that sort of thing?
I think we talked about this quite a bit at the last workshop, right? We've continued to work with the architect, but I don't really think there's been any massive changes. Rocky, you want to talk about the three options and the schedule?
Yeah, I'll do my best. We approached this with PBK. We had to narrow the scope in and have some bookends on that. And, typically when we're evaluating alternatives, there's a do-nothing alternative. And I think as a district and as the board, we all kind of recognize that Building C needed upgrades. So our do-nothing alternative became a minimum option of improving Building C. And then the second option was staying here on site, but doing upgrades to this building, upgrading Building C as well, and then considering how FBR might play its way into our administrative or operations spaces. So there were two options associated with that of how the FBR would work into that scenario. And then the third scenario was going to another site. We have property adjacent to Romer that we wanted to consider. It makes sense. It's near our largest facility, and that was the larger option. And surprisingly, what we saw was that the condition of this building, the needed repairs, having to remove staff off-site and temporary house them while construction on this site took place. The cost estimates between staying here and upgrading this building and doing a whole new building started to get pretty comparable when you're starting to talk the numbers we're talking about. And at this stage in the project, I think there's a a level of uncertainty in some cost estimates. We don't have detailed design.
Yeah, and Rocky, I know that we had spoken a little bit about this in engineering, but just for the rest of the board, there was kind of a 3A and a 3B. What's being talked about here is the building a whole new headquarters, but we did look at the option of, do we do a full, like Rocky said, move everybody off site, completely rehab this entire facility, and the cost of that was pretty much one.
Yeah, I mean, we're making some assumptions in some of that analysis, but that's what the analysis is showing us right now. Yeah, anything, did I miss anything there, John?
I think that's, just looking ahead, we're finishing up the analysis with PBK, and we spoke to them earlier this week. I think the next stop there, we're planning to finalize the study internally and bring that to the board meeting on September 4th was our target.
Yeah, and we're gonna, I think yeah, that's right. And then we're gonna hit a few committees, Finance and Engineering Committee, maybe do a deeper dive and get committee input before that board meeting.
Yeah, take the month of August, run that by Finance Committee, Engineering Operations Planning Committee, take your comments, bring that to the full board on September 4th, just for, get you the latest on that and then following that, we'll be back with Raftellus in September for, to get a presentation on the final rate study based on the direction you give here today.
Yes, sir.
I have a question, and this is for John Wright. I'm looking at the graph for operating capital reserves.
Yes, ma'am.
Comparing scenario 2 with scenario 3 for fiscal year 2030. If you could just go a little bit more into detail about for fiscal year 2030, how come we have more money in scenario 2 with the less rate revenue increase than we do for scenario 3?
Well, let's take a look, number one, at scenario 2, and then we can refer back to scenario 3 if you'd be willing to go back there for us. And so I see in 2030, as I kind of look across the graph, I see a number that's in the, let's say, $35 million range there. Then on scenario 3, if we go back to that one, I see a number that's significantly less than that. And I'm going to give you my answer, and then I'm going to have Elise jump in. My answer to the reason there's more cash in scenario 2 is we're not expending any revenue in scenario 2 to build the new HQ building. Whereas in scenario 3, the new HQ building is $70 million. We're seeking $50 million of debt, but that leaves $20 million that has to be financed by operational cash flows from rates. And so there is a cash outflow in scenario 3 of rate revenue dollars to help pay for the new HQ because we're not financing 100% with debt. The other thing I would say is that when we take on that debt, we start to have debt service payments that we have to meet for the next 30 years. And I think one of the reasons you may also see less cash in FY 2030 is because of the start of the debt service payments.
Okay, so just to follow up with what you just said, even at 7.5% with a $20 million debt service and with a $50 million loan, we're barely going to be meeting the target balance after 2030.
You do have 2 years there, 2030 and 2031, where you are meeting your target and you're right at the target. Yes, ma'am.
If I may, John, to clarify a little bit more on the scenarios, I think these two scenarios really show the power of leveraging with debt this project, because scenario 2 has no debt, and by being able to get these proceeds, we were able to just have to increase the rates by 1%. So we're trying to be very sensitive with that, and that's what we were trying to feel where we could really be at, where we're not adjusting too much. Yeah, we'll have some, you could say some years where we'll be tying our belt in 2029 and 2030. We've also put a target for our debt covenant ratio at 1.75, which that's a target. The obligation is 1.2. So we still meet that, so we're still in compliance, but it's a target. The other, to answer another question that Director Garcia said for the reserves, if we don't meet the target, we're not out of compliance, but it just shows that we're going to meet. And as you can see, by 2033, we are already above the target. And like I said, during the budget time, we've been building reserves. And the importance of building reserves is to actually use them when the district really needs them for infrastructure at the pleasure of the board. So I think this is a great scenario, a good story to tell that we've been very cautious with our reserves and we're using it when we best need it.
And
One-
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
just to follow what you just said, I guess I'm a little bit confused. If you go back to scenario 2, if there's no debt that we're incurring, I don't see in the graph where we're reducing the 20 million. Is it just like a gradual reduction in our budget, in the reserves?
Right, so there won't be a reduction, but as you can see, the debt covenant ratio for every year will be above 2, so we'll be in better shape because we're not using our reserves to and like John Wright said, it's not, the rate increases are not funding the operational building.
And if I can also kind of chime in as well, that, you know, as was previously stated, the rates that we're considering are the first 5 years.
Correct.
And that really those outer years are very hypothetical at this point. I mean, John, I'm not sure if you want to speak to the level of confidence on years 5 through 10, because typically I know in these type of things, you have much more confidence in year 1 through 3, maybe a little bit in 3 to 4, but beyond that, it's just, you know, a lot of things can happen in the world, you know, and it could be a completely different scenario that we might look at as a future board in 2029 and 2030.
Agreed.
Is that a follow-up question for Elise? For scenario 2, when is that, how's that $20 million scheduled? Is that coming out in 1 year or over 2 years?
Oh, let me see. That 20 million, if I go to the right sheet, has 4 million spent over the course of 5 years, or each in the 5 years, starting in 29, ending in, sorry, I'm scrolling around, starting in 29, ending in 2023.
Okay, so that's why we're not seeing that big, like $20
It's a
million
smooth-
drop in 1 year. It's
Yep.
spread out over 4 years.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I don't know if we have a summary slide for the financial planning scenarios. I don't believe we do, but of real interest is whether or not the board has a sense about these 3 scenarios and which that you might prefer, you know, and just to try to kind of start off that thinking. I think that there are 3 maybe initial areas of consideration in pondering these 3 scenarios. Number 1 is whether you perceive there to be a critically important difference in 5.5% annual increases versus 6.5% versus 7.5%. And I fully understand that we want to minimize the level of rate revenue increases we have to impose on our customer base. But so those percentage increases are kind of an interesting, possibly critical decision point. A second interesting decision point is how the board feels about the need for a new headquarters building. And of course, I can't speak to your preferences about that or executive staff's preferences or how your customers might perceive a new headquarters building. And then the third critical issue that may be of importance in kind of leaning one way or another on the scenarios is how the board feels about taking on additional debt to finance the headquarters building. So to me, three things that jump out: annual rate revenue increases. Is the new headquarters building appropriate and necessary? And if so, is it appropriate to be using debt? Those might be three initial areas of consideration.
All right. Before I throw it out to all of you, I did have one question maybe for Rocky. Rocky, if we went with scenario 3 and built a new headquarters, what's the estimated life of a new building
That's a
from a construction
multi-million-dollar question, right? So, I mean, different components would have different useful lives, but overall, I think this building is in some portions are in that 70-year lifespan, but I think that 50 to 75
50 to
years
75 for a new building?
is good. And then, obviously, components of the building would be shorter, like the HVAC systems and things like that. But
Overall, though.
yeah, and then the other thing to note is that we would be selecting materials that would have long expected lifespans, and there's also efficiencies that go along with a new building that we aren't recognizing now.
Okay.
That's worth noting.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to kind of ask that question because certainly, taking on a 30-year bond might seem like a big thing, but in some ways, it's the future of the district is going to help pay for what they're going to enjoy potentially for the next 50 to 70 years. So, board, what's your guys' thoughts on these options?
If I may, in regards to the rate revenue increase by 2%, I believe that's just negligible between scenario 1 and 3. But kind of towards your question, I can see us if we did scenario 2, is that there might be some hidden costs that would go from 20 million to say 30 million as we open walls and look at structures, and who knows what's underneath and what damage has been done during the course of the age of this building, including earthquakes. Looking at it and looking at the long-term vision, I would be in favor of scenario 3 to leave this building alone and start building in a different location to when that building could take effect with the minimal impact on the staff as well.
I just wanted to make sure the board was aware that we have slides coming up that'll show different tier structures and what actually like a 5.5, a 6.5, a 7.5% rate revenue increase means for like different customers, for the residential customers in terms of dollars per month. So that might help the discussion. So that's coming up in a few slides.
Yeah, I'm all for the new building because when you open up an old building, you don't know what you got. And it could be things that don't fit anymore, things that are outdated. At least if you start with a new building, you know what you got and what you need. There's not going to be much change orders, And so we know you can have $1 million, $2 million budgeted, or $5 million budgeted for a redo here and a remodel, but then you're going to have like a couple million in change orders once you find the stuff, right? So if we know where we want to go and we just start with new, we got the stuff that we need. And like you said, there's products that are efficient, that are fire retardant, they last longer, they're more friendly to the environment. There's a lot of new stuff out there. And so why not just do it from the ground up right? And it's just my opinion.
I think there's a lot to be said about a little more certainty in a greenfield project than tearing into walls and finding things that we just don't know are here. There's certainly a risk factor associated with that. Yeah.
There is value in this property. If we would leave and go to the Linden site, we've got a little bit of information on that, maybe $3.5 million plus or minus for the value of this building on the front, couple acres, something like that. just something else to think about, and we'll be bringing that detail, back to committee and the board with the PBK work. And we asked PBK to do a little additional effort in looking at the efficiencies of a purpose-built new building. It's pretty significant. They're seeing a 5 to 15% efficiency increase in your staff with a purpose-built building. So we asked them to take maybe a conservative approach, like take that 5% and quantify that and build that into the kind of the cost assessment of the various scenarios. So that's coming up as well.
Angie, any thoughts?
No, just like my colleagues here, I'm in preference of scenario 3, having a new building. Just by hearing what it would take another 27 years to maybe go through the process again, I think we're already outdated. We're due for a new building, and I'm going to say 10 years from now, 50 million might be 80 million. So I'm for scenario 3, but I do have just one clarifying question, is that the $70 million for the building, does that include demolition of this building, or is it just construction of a new building?
No, it wouldn't change this site. So we would still have to figure out what to do with this site. And I think John's point of we're trying to figure out the value on the open market of what this building could maybe feed
Yeah,
back
so those would
some way.
be more questions down the road, that the 70 million is just for the construction of the new building, and then once it was completed and we relocated, then we would have to look at options of what do we do with this site.
But there's certain functions that happen on this site, pump station, reservoir, well in the back, that we would want to maintain for our supply portfolio.
And does scenario 3 include even the operations building in the back? Like everything is all included in the 70 million?
It would be relocating that function to the new site,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
So scenario 3?
Is $50 million taking on that loan, is it industry standard for an agency of this size under the scenario that's been designed? That being 7.7 or 7.5. Are we overreaching, or is that considered industry standards?
I think I would defer to the experts
Yeah.
over there.
I think the way to answer that question is always to look at your debt service coverage ratio. And obviously, there are a lot of ways to try to answer the question of how much debt is too much, and various ratios that could be looked at. But debt service coverage is the critical, is the answer to the question you just posed. To the extent that you have operating cash flows that are adequate, that you can pay for your O&M expenses, and then have enough left over to pay your required debt service, and even have a little bit left over still that you can have, a 1.7 times coverage ratio, or a coverage ratio that's over 2, that's an indication of a utility that can handle the debt that's being proposed. And to just stop for a minute and talk about the debt service coverage calculation, it's basically revenue minus O&M expenses gives you net revenues available for debt service. And when you take net revenues available for debt service and you divide into it your annual debt service coverage payments, or your annual debt service payments, we're going to come out with a ratio. And if the ratio is 1.0, it means after you pay for O&M, you can only pay your debt service, nothing above that. But if you come out with a ratio of 2.0, it means that you've got enough money left over after paying your O&M expenses that you could pay 2 times your annual debt service. And so, as Jose mentioned, what we're using in this model right now is a planning target of 1.75, I think, Jose. But your actual contractual requirement is much less than that. And so I think the answer to the question is based on these projections, $50 million is not out of line. It's not excessive. Now, we have to recognize, though, and I do want to put in this caveat, that there may be an eventuality where you want to issue debt for some other purpose. And so if you 2 or 3, 4 years later, you needed to issue debt for another $50 million, you'd have to once again look at your projected debt service coverage ratio. And that indeed might cause you to have a higher level of rate revenue increases. But I think this $50 million is not outlandish. It's not an excessive amount.
And I would also add in too that with, these are very conservative estimates as far as, assuming no grant revenue, for example. And I know that Socorro and her team are doing a lot of hard work on that front. We've done a lot of lobbying and have been able to still, even when times are maybe tougher, still getting appropriations and other things, which would ultimately help with that bottom line, because that would be additional revenue coming in that helps that calculation. So I think that to kind of help answer your question, for our size, it's probably fine. I wouldn't go and say, well, let's take out another 100. But certainly, as an agency, at least in the 10 years I've been here, we haven't really taken a lot of debt on. In fact, we've actually refinanced and paid off a lot of debt more in the past. But that's where having a strong fiscal team is very important, because even if we look back at our past budgets, we might have estimated that our debt coverage would be 2.5. Well, but because our team does such a good job managing expenses, the actual end of year often is 6.5. So we actually often do a lot better because we manage our expenses well, and we bring in often revenue that we weren't counting on as well.
Okay, well, I'm also supportive of scenario 3.
All right, John. Well, it sounds like we have some consensus here towards option 3. So with that, you can probably continue on.
Yes. Yeah, next slide, Jose. Next one still. So here what oops. Yeah, let's go back up one. I apologize, I made you go too far. I think here what we see is a comparison of what your meter service charges would be under each one of these scenarios. And for now, I'm just going to focus on the first line, which is the 5/8 or 3/4 inch meter size customers who are a little bit over half of your total customers on your system. And you can see currently we're at $22.21. And then what we do is we look at scenario 1, 2, and 3. You can see a slight climb in those projected monthly meter service charges, up to $23.82 under scenario 3. And of course, you can see that for all relevant meter sizes. Rate increases are always difficult, but these increases, which are comparing current versus what would be charged in FY26, are fairly mild. So, for example, 22.21 under the current rates, up to 23.82 under scenario 3.
And John, if you go down to the larger meter sizes, that increase is going to be much higher. Can you speak to that?
Yes, sir. Thank you for bringing that up. And so I'm going to ask you all to focus on the current rates column. And if you would, please go down and look at, for example, the 4, 6, and 8-inch current monthly meter charges. And 4 is shown there at 128.56. Then a 6, you're currently charging 195.02, and in 8, you're charging 261.48. Now, in contrast, when you look at the 3 scenarios to the right, and it doesn't matter which one we pick, but it might be easiest to just start with scenario 1. For a 4-inch, the 128.56 goes up to 284.81. That's a whatever it is, $110, $120 increase. The 6-inch goes from 195.02 all the way up to a proposed 582.58. And then finally, the 8-inch goes from 261.48 up to 834.55. Now, the reason for those proposed increases in the large meter sizes is that the industry standard method of establishing meter service charges is to look at the maximum flow rate that can be handled through a particular size meter. And so, for example, let's say that the maximum GPM that can be pushed through a 3/4 inch meter is 40 or 50 GPM. Well, the maximum GPM that could be pushed through like an 8-inch meter is many, many times that. It might be 200 or 300 times that. And the way meter service charges are structured is they're structured so that the meter service charge reflects the amount of flow that can be pushed through that meter. And your current meter service charges, in my firm's opinion, at your large meter sizes are not reflecting the amount of flow that you can push through a 4, 6, or 8-inch meter. The proposed meter charges for those large size meters does reflect the amount of flow. And the reason the amount of flow is important is that these large meters, or all meters, but especially the large ones, can impose pretty massive instantaneous demands on your system. And to the extent they can impose those instantaneous demands, we need to allocate cost to those larger meters for that meter capacity in effect. And so that's why you see the proposed increases for the larger meters being so high. And to me, they're appropriate. And I wouldn't use the word high, but I would use the word significant increases. But there is a very good cost of service reason for what you're seeing.
So the new rates follow industry standard. We're probably undercharging in the past relative to industry standard. With the new proposed scenario 1, for example, we check those rates relative to our comparable agencies, and they're certainly in line with comparable agencies at these new rates based on industry standard.
And so historically, we were not following what most other agencies in our area did as far as appropriately charging for larger meters.
That would be my interpretation.
I concur with that. And, I think you might find a few agencies that are only charging $261 for an 8-inch connection, but not many.
And if anyone's interested, there's a rate survey of other communities in the backup of these slides, so we can take a look at that at the end.
So I'm assuming that the 5/8 and the 3/4 and the 1-inch, are those all residential?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
1.5? Is that partial residential?
Maybe
Or is it-
duplexes could be
okay.
getting into larger
Okay.
residences or
Okay, cool.
multifamily,
Okay, cool.
some commercial customers.
All right, so didn't want to assume anything. All right.
Yeah, and just moving forward, we're not going to see any new 5/8 and 3/4 inch meters. New construction requires at least 1-inch meter connections for all residential construction due to the fire flow requirements and sprinklers that are now required. So that will eventually be our largest meter count.
And I do think we have a slide coming up where we're going to be showing you the projected profile of fixed versus variable revenue recovery. So on this slide that we're moving to our commodity or volumetric rates. And your existing tier structure, tier 1, 0 to 10 HCF, 31.2% of your consumption tier. And your second tier goes from 11 to 50 HCF. And then anything over 50 HCF is in tier 3. And these volumetric rates apply to all types of customers, all land use types, where it's single family, residential, commercial property. And when we look at that existing rate structure, we focus in on tier 2, which is 11 to 50 HCF currently. And we would like to recommend to you that you consider changing tier 2 to 11 to 30 HCF over there in the recommended column. And if you do that, tier 3 would start at greater than 30. Now, the reason we're recommending this change is that 50 HCF is a lot of water. And there are very few residential customers that have that level of usage. And on your system, it's a single family residential dominated system there. And you see in bullet point 2, it's 93% of all of your accounts and 62% of your total system demand. And so because single family residential customers never get above 50 HCF, certainly most of 50 HCF, that tier 3 threshold is not allowing you to send a cost price signal. You can just keep using water from 11 upwards. And even if you're using 43 HCF, you're not going to move into tier 3. And so you're not going to get a cost-based water use efficiency price signal. And if you wonder why I'm using the term cost-based, is we are in California, and everything we do under Proposition 218 has to be cost-based. And so the water efficiency price signal can't be a policy decision. It has to be based on cost. Now, if we were to lower the tier 2 threshold to 30 HCF, what we believe is that you would have many more single family residential customers who would get over 30 and move into tier 3 and get that cost-based price signal. Now, what our analysis indicates is that on your system, a single family residential customer in the summer on average uses 21 HCF, which is a combination of indoor and outdoor usage. And then the last bullet point kind of sums up everything I've been saying. And so 30 is a more realistic breakpoint in our opinion. Your average customer in the summer doesn't use more than 30, but there are some. And those customers that use more than 30 will pay a higher rate. And that is a water use efficiency price signal. Under your current system of 50, hardly any single family residential customers use that much, and people can use a lot of water without having to pay more for it. So that's the reason we're proposing this change in the consumption thresholds under your existing rate structure.
All right, board, anybody have any concerns, or everybody okay with that recommendation? Yeah, looks like we're all good with it. Thank you, John.
Yes, sir. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we are with much like the comparison we did of monthly service charges. Here's a look at our volumetric rates, um, and so at least I believe under scenario 1, 2, and 3, we've got our new structure, which is 38 CF, right? These rates
That's
are
correct.
yeah. So what we're comparing is current rates at the 58 CF breakpoint to proposed rates under each scenario at the 38 CF breakpoint. And so one way to look at it is in tier 1, comparing current to scenario 3. Current's 213 per 8 CF. Under scenario 3, the proposed would be 233. So we have a 20-cent differential. In tier 2, currently, where you can use up to 58 CF, we're charging $2.30. Under scenario 3, you could only use up to 30, and getting up to 30, you'd pay $2.54. And then tier 3 currently starts at more than 50, it's $2.53. And under scenario 3, we would start at more than 30 at $2.73. So because there's a little bit of a change because there's a major proposed change in these breakpoints, makes the comparison of these rates a little bit apples to oranges. But in the next slides, we have a lot of customer bill impacts to present you, which hopefully will add some clarity to it. So Jose, can we go to the next one? Oh, here we go. This is my favorite slide. So we estimate for FY26, if we were to stay on your current rate structure, your rate revenue recovery would be 31.5% fixed and 68.5 variable. Now let's contrast that to scenario 3, where we estimate your profile would be 33.3% fixed and 66.7% variable. And the reason that you're seeing that increase in projected fixed revenue recovery is because we're aligning the rates for your large meters to industry standard cost allocation principles. And we're getting more revenue from those large meters, and that's helping contribute to the profile of fixed versus variable revenue recovery. Okay, so Jose, I think we're about to the bill impacts on the next slide, I hope. Elise, do you feel comfortable talking the board through these bill impacts?
Oh, I can certainly try. So, staff and I worked together to find a few different usage thresholds for primarily single-family residential customers that we would encapsulate typical usage patterns. So, on the slide here, you'll see the first line at 17 HCF is average monthly consumption for fiscal year 24. So that's just total consumption for the year divided by the total number of customer bills. So that's customers times 12 to get bills. So in that first column, you'll see the existing bill under existing rates. So that's that same tier structure with tier 2 going from stopping at 50, which most single family residential customers aren't using that much anyway. So that bill includes 10 HCF and tier 1 and then 7 in tier 2. Plus their fixed charge. And then scenario 1 at $63.74 has a change from the existing bill at $4.13. Scenario 2, $64.32 has the difference of $4.71. And then scenario 3, $64.90 with that difference of $5.29. And the same flow for the 21 HCF, which is average summer consumption. So I think that was from May to October, just peak irrigation season. That's 21 HCF. So that total bill for our summer usage for a typical residential customer would be $68.81. And you can just stop me from talking too fast. I can kind of blow through things quickly. So for, again, summer bill, scenario 1, that change would be $4.85. Scenario 2 would be $5.55. Scenario 3, $6.25. And these are for the 5/8 and 3/4 inch meter customers. I don't know if I said that or not.
Now, I want to interject something here, which I I probably shouldn't do, but I'm going
Go
to.
ahead.
I was here one workshop ago with John and Jose and Linda and the entire team presenting to you. And I presented to you preliminary bill impacts where the bill for the majority of our residential customers was going down. And at the workshop, many of you reacted with, "Oh, that's ridiculous. That can't be possible. Why would the bill go down?" Well, the reason that we were showing you a decline in bills at that workshop, which may have been in May, is our financial plan assumed that you had many more large meters on your system that you actually do. So we were getting a lot of revenue from large meters, which really isn't there. And so these bill impacts that Elise has just walked you through for single-family residential customers. Number one, it has all the right inputs for the number of customers at each meter size, and therefore number two, these are more plausible outcomes, and that we feel very comfortable with compared to what I showed you in May. I didn't probably need to say that, but I felt like I should.
Now, John, I do have a question for you and Elise. So if we're looking at, let's just take scenario 3. So it's either $5.29 increase or $6.25. Is that increase for each year, or is that for all 5 years total?
No, sir, it's just for FY26.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So they'd be looking at that same kind of level of increase for the next 5 years.
Yes, sir. And what we would do, for example, in the 529 that you see there, for FY27, we would take that 529 and we would increase it by our overall total system, 7.5%. And then we would do that for FY28, 29, 2030. So this is just FY26.
I just wanted to clarify that point. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Elise, I interrupted you with my mea culpa there.
That's okay. Does anyone have any questions on these 5/8 and 3/4 inch meter customers?
Any other questions? Nope. Thank you.
Okay, Jose, you can go on ahead. And this next one's just going to be a visualization of the bills plus a winter consumption bill impact at 14 HCF, just to show the scale of the changes. Again, just for fiscal year 26. So winter bill impacts over on the left-hand side there for each of the scenarios. Middle one, average at 17 HCF, and then summer at 21. So all the numbers line up.
And just
Next.
one more question, just to clarify. So the increase is per month, correct? Of how much difference there'd be per month, or is it for the whole year?
Per month. So that for, let's say, $5.29 change would be for like an average bill. So it depends on the bill and the usage, obviously, but
All right.
that would be per month.
Thank you.
So this is going to be very similar, but 1 inch meter customers do have a different fixed charge. And because this will be the most numerous meter going forward, we thought it was important to include this. So same consumption, 17 HCF for the average monthly consumption, 21 for the average summer. Existing bill for a 1 inch customer, all 1 inch customers at 17 HCF would be $70.47. Under scenario 1, that increase would only be $2.44, $3.06, and $3.68 for each of the scenarios. And then summer going from 79.67 going up 316, 390, 464 under each of the scenarios. And that increase is going to be a little bit smaller than 3/4 inch customers just because of the reallocation of those meter cost ratios that John talked about.
Okay.
And same thing, winter, average, and summer bill impacts. with each of the scenarios compared to current rates, just to see the scale. And so this one is going to be representative of our 2-inch commercial meter customers. So 2-inch commercial meter customers on average use about 115 HCF per month. So again, that's just total for 2-inch meters customers specifically divided by the total bills. So their existing bill would be $344.93, and it'd be going up $38, $41, and $45. And then under each of the scenarios, and then the 210 HCF is representative of the top 15% of those 2-inch commercial customer bills. I wanted to find something that, was maybe a little bit higher than average, but wasn't completely out of the realm of possibilities, just to see a larger impact. So for that high monthly user, for a 2-inch now would be $585, and then it'd go up $50, $57, $64 under each of the scenarios. And again, mostly due to the meter charge allocation and the slight increases in the volumetric rates. And then those graphical bill impacts. Again, just this is where I feel like the scale is most useful, because you think $40, but then you see that, oh, it's just a slight tick up relative to their current bill. And we put this slide in here just for almost as a Q&A slide, any questions you may have, lingering thoughts, more discussion, for selecting a financial plan scenario preference, and, if we hadn't done this before, approving the tier structure changes. But
I think we've given you feedback on both of those, but I don't know. Anyone have anything else they'd like to add?
No questions from me. Very thorough report. Thank you.
Yes, I have just one quick question, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
You're not being asked today, nor will you be asked at the time of the rate hearing, to approve or commit to a new headquarters or any capital improvement program.
Correct.
Project. So my concern is that by saying we're going to go with the third scenario because we plan perhaps doing the new headquarters, what happens in terms of our cost-based Prop 218 justification if a year in we say that's not possible to do the new headquarters, we're not going to do it, it doesn't make sense, it's going to actually cost twice as much. I realize that we're talking about a much larger capital improvement program too, as well as debt financing, but just in case there's a question at the time of the rate hearing or a legal question about what happens if you decide not to do the new headquarters, what's going to be the argument there? That we're still cost-based. Is someone going to be ready to make that argument that we're still cost-based even if we decide in year 2 not to do the headquarters? I guess that's my question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we didn't do the headquarters, we just wouldn't undertake that borrowing. So we wouldn't have the borrowing, and our reserves and debt coverage ratio would be looking a lot better.
Means that
Other comments?
Yeah, let me take a crack at it. And
Yeah.
I very much want to emphasize I am not an attorney, and Raftellus is not a law firm. But if you issued a Prop 218 notice and it was for the years, let's say 26, 27, and 29, or 26, 27, and 28, and as you got into, 27 or 28, your projected expenditures changed, and for whatever reason, you're not going to do the headquarters building, and you're not going to have an increase in debt service. I think what you would do is you would not put into effect the noticed rates, and that may mean you would issue another Prop 218 notice, but you would not be locked in to keep charging those higher rates, I don't believe.
Well, I think that's a good point. I mean, I've seen it both ways. I mean, it is difficult to have I'm not saying this is what you're proposing, but it's difficult to have a structure where every year the board has to decide whether to go with the increase or not. It really should be automatic, otherwise we're bogged down every year in terms of not doing it or doing it or maybe redoing a new 218 notice. I guess my only concern is that we need to be able to argue, and I'm saying we won't, but to argue that even if we decided not to do the new headquarters, there are a lot of, to your point, there's a lot of increased costs of everything else where at the end of the day, we are still charging a reasonable cost of the service provided. We're not going to have this huge delta, this huge surplus nut out there that we did not anticipate. And even if we did, I guess at that point, then we would have to readjust the rate structure. But it sounds to me like that may not even be an issue, that with all the other costs going up, with doing the debt financing, that we're not going to be over the cost of the service provided. We'll be right at it. Maybe a little less, but hopefully right at it. So just to keep that in mind when we make the argument in the notice and at the hearing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Anything else, John, or you guys have the direction that you need for the next step?
Yes, sir. I really appreciate the board's clarity on both these issues.
All right.
So I think we're good on our end.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the presentation. It was very informative, and we look forward to moving to the next stage here.
Thank you all. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, now I think we have a proposed outreach schedule.
Good evening, President Young, members of the board. This evening, I have Susan Bankerhead and Megan Platt from JPW. If there's any further questions from the presentation you would like to ask. In working our communications plan, our outreach plan, we did identify some key dates just to ensure that we are meeting all the proper notice deadlines for the Prop 218, the tentatively Prop 218 process. Next slide. The first part of the campaign, which is from now to October, is the Valley View Water campaign. And as we prepare to begin a public process regarding a potential rate adjustment, we want to be transparent and ensure our customers understand. WDOD will highlight the values of its continued service to customers through a bill insert, a newsletter, will be a actual newsletter mailer that will go out in August, social media posts, and community workshops. The Valley Water campaign lays the groundwork for that Prop 218 process, and as mentioned, understand trust and community support. It helps, and with the Valley Water is to inform our customers that a study is underway to ensure we are protecting long-term value of costs, aging infrastructure, rising costs, so we can deliver high quality and reliable water. And as mentioned, our goal is to reinforce that value that West Valley provides to customers by delivering safe and dependable water, and establishes us as the most credible source of information ahead of public outreach on the rate adjustment process. The focus is, again, continued service to customers, quality of water service, and how West Valley Water is working to deliver that high quality and reliable water. Within that, our team has identified community stakeholders to bring this Valley Water campaign. These community leaders and partners build trust, strengthen relationships, and create informed advocates who can help share accurate information during the future Prop 218 process. As mentioned above on this slide, are key stakeholders identified, but we're happy to add any other additional ones that you might see of value. We identify the Rotaries, the Chambers of Commerce. Next slide. Council meetings, as well as Bloomington MAC. Any questions on these slides?
Any questions? Nope.
On the next slide, you will see the Valley of Water campaigns, and this will be presentations that we will be advertising on this flyer that'll be going out in August. And we will be having 6 workshops, one which includes the Bloomington MAC in the month of September, October. And as you see here, these are just proposed locations that we identified within the service area.
Okay.
Once the board adopts the tentative Prop 218 process, we will also at that point have a different mailer go out. But at that point, our goal now shifts a little different. Again, as we want to continue that West Valley's Commission open and transparent rate setting process, our goal is for customers to understand the water rates, why a rate adjustment is being considered, and then reinforce our commitment as transparent, delivering high quality, reliable water while maintaining cost. Next slide. Within this time frame, October 20th to November 22nd, we'll be proposing different workshops within the district. Again, these locations are within the 5 different districts of our board members, and ensuring that we are in the different communities. At this point, we'll be working with the board of directors to ensure that these locations work within your different districts. Are there any questions for myself or for JPW?
I do have a question. If you can just elaborate, what are you going to be talking about on the community presentations promoted versus the rate study presentations?
In the beginning, the value of the campaign water, we want to ensure that we are preparing our customers by letting them know what we've done as an agency, the different projects we've been working on. And we do want to be transparent that we are doing a rate study, and that we are looking at the costs of aging infrastructure and rising costs. And so therefore we're trying to get ahead. We're trying to ensure that we are getting ahead of the game and getting those community stakeholders who are able to, when the Prop 218 process does come, that they're able to advocate on our behalf. The Prop 218 process, the workshops in October through November, those will be the Prop 218 workshops where we're talking about the rates.
Answer your question?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a comment. I think this is very critical. In speaking with different community individuals, I'm asked, why does my water bill keep going up? And I explain to them that the rates have not gone up, but they seem to assume that they have. So it's critical to educate the public on where, excuse me, where we're at and where we're going. And that will curtail a lot of anxiety. Yes.
I agree with you. I think that's a big focus of our campaigns, to relay that message that in the last, I believe, 12 years, we haven't raised rates, that we've been fiscally responsible in maintaining, being able to update the infrastructure and maintain the costs. But now, we are reassessing with all, like I mentioned, with aging infrastructure and rising cost.
Well, and I can also say that in the 10 years I've been here, I've had many people do the same thing. And then once you start to ask them where they live, you pretty quickly realize that they're either in Rialto water or in Fontana water. And it's just that, oh, you're actually not a West Valley customer. And yes, they've been raising their rates almost every year over the last decade, whereas we haven't. So I think a lot of times you have to kind of first ascertain if they actually are a West Valley customer or not.
Yeah, I can.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, also sharing the fact that the water rates haven't increased in
Yeah.
a decade, right?
It's been a decade.
Yeah, I can envision a couple slides in these presentations, and one is showing how our water rates have not changed essentially for 10 years, and then compare that over 10 years of CPI, construction cost index, the cost of power,
Correct.
maybe another commodity as a comparison. And then the other slide would be showing our rates relative to our neighboring agencies.
Yep. Because I know
We're gonna be
I
at the
think
lower end.
Fontana raises it pretty much every year on the dot. So I'm not sure about Rialto if they've done it every year, but I think they've raised it a couple times in that decade. So yeah, I think like you said, showing how not only have we kept it flat, but how all of our other costs have continued to go up, but also how the rest of the region has been raising their rates and we haven't.
Yeah.
Right. Any other comments, questions? Well, thank you, Socorro. Thank you, ladies. We look forward to working with all of you on the upcoming workshops. And yeah, now it's time to go out there and start talking to folks. So,
We look forward to it.
yeah. All right. Anything else from us for tonight?
Just looking ahead, September 4th, we'll be hearing from PBK, and then I think for the water rate study report, you'll see that on September 18th.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you everybody for being here. I know it's a special occasion, but thank you all for being here, and we are adjourned.